This Beef Market Update podcast is brought to you by Brett Young. You treat them like family, feed them like family. Talk to your retailer about Brett Young's forage and corn options for a happy, healthy herd or visit brettyoung.ca.
Let's talk about what's going on in these beef markets. It's time for another edition of the Beef Market Update with Ann Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. And Happy New Year. It is great to chat with you.
Yes, happy 2025. I got to get used to writing it and saying it.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
25.
Yeah.
I used to remember like Y2K, like it was, the world was ending. Look, we made it, Ann. We made it.
We made
Quarter
it.
century. Okay, we're off to a pretty hopping start when it comes to prices here on January 3rd, 2025. What happened this week?
Yeah, the year is fresh, but wow, what a great start. Sometimes we start the new year and things are very quiet, not much happens. But in the US and the southern markets, Texas and Kansas, we jumped $3 to $4 from last week. So 195 to 196, their live trade here yesterday. In the north, those Nebraska feeding regions, $3 higher dressed. So 310 delivered US. So, just a smoking market to start the year. The choice cutout kind of driving some of that in terms of it was up $2 this week, 323.5. And just what the reasoning behind that would be packer margins negative. So they cut their kills, push the cutout, and kind of all these things roll together. So that's kind of driving it, which is great. Locally in Alberta, strong as well. So some dress cattle this week at 430 delivered. That's $10 higher than last week in Alberta. So a light trade, but still great, solid tune to start 25 with.
Yeah, you almost did it again there.
I know.
25.
25.
Yeah, it always takes some getting used to every single year. We do the same thing from 23 to 24. Okay, so let's look ahead here. 2025, like you said, we're off to a pretty good start price-wise. We want to kind of provide a bit of an outlook here on the year ahead, what to watch out for, maybe some predictions, some thoughts. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think I have to start on the supply side because that's the piece I feel most comfortable and confident about in terms of what lies ahead. It's only a piece of it, obviously, but the supply side still really points to very friendly in terms of that North American beef supply. We're going to have a smaller cow herd recorded for January 125. We'll get that report from USDA later this month. The Canadian report from StatsCan will be in February, but they'll both say cow numbers smaller to start 25. So that means a smaller calf crop coming and ultimately smaller beef production. How much smaller is still going to depend a lot on that whole heifer retention piece, and we'll see how that plays out. So that's kind of on the watch list. It'll be smaller. How much smaller? We'll watch as we go through the cattle on feed reports each month. So there's things we can watch about, and that's why we have a talk every 2 weeks, Sean, to things we can watch and kind of keep our eyes out. At this point in time, the projection for 2025 U.S. beef production is down 2%, and U.S. cattle slaughter, that's fed and non-fed, to be down 3%. So that's kind of how we're going to start the year. Canadian numbers will obviously be down as well. The second thing, after we talk about supply, in terms of what happens to prices, is demand, obviously. And we talked so much about demand in 24, but it was a good news story. Sometimes we talk about demand with struggles, but that wasn't the case in 24. So now we come into 25, retail prices, wholesale prices are record high. And does that continue? I'd say yes in 25. Now the question is how do we move this beef forward as we're going? And I think demand, if my projection for 25 is could we hold what we had last year together, I think that's a win. So stable demand, but lots on the question marks there in terms of inflation, how consumers are feeling about their incomes, competitive meats, all those pieces play into really where beef demand ends up being. But so demand's going to be something, and I always want to remind listeners that demands, we talk about it in one bucket, but really it's about three buckets. We've got retail demand, we've got food service or restaurant demand, and of course we've got trade. And for us as Canadians, of course, trade and for Canadian beef production, close to half of our market. So whereas in the US, it's closer to 11%. So the two countries look at trade differently, and that impacts our demand differently in the two countries. But it's so all those three pieces are going to be parts to watch as we go through 25.
Well, after the last couple of years and some of the concerns about the economy, and then you look at how strong beef demand has been given the prices that are out there in the restaurant trade or for in the grocery store, I would be very cautious to make any sort of you go back a couple of years, we've had lots of chats, but I don't know about demand this year. I don't know. I'm not sure about this. And the consumer has just pushed through. It's kind of amazing. It's an amazing story.
It is an amazing story. Now, I think producers and our industry have done an exceptional job of, we've got this product that has got so much versatility in terms of the different cuts, the different pieces, the different price points. And I think we've really played that to our benefit. And quality, obviously, at the top of that. Consumers today are looking for quality. So that's a win.
Okay, but hey, Trump tariffs. That has to be a factor, doesn't it?
It has to. I mean, that was going to be on my list. I was leaving it till later, but okay, we'll put it in now. We don't know. Yeah, Sean, all of this, we don't know how it plays out in terms of that unknown, in terms of that tariff threat. How, what, when, on, what, where, all those things. So we don't know how that plays out, but for sure it has an impact. We know from a Canadian perspective how important U.S. trade is to Canada. That's a no-brainer. So that one, it's there, Sean, but I can't make a prediction on that one.
But it's it's definitely their headlights are shining bright on that one.
The headlights are shining bright. And then play the piece into the exchange rate piece in terms of our Canadian dollar, 69.5 last night. And then the question is, tariffs, a stronger dollar in the U.S., does that impact U.S. exports of beef? Though there's so many different sides of this in terms of what that might lead to.
Well, take that dollar. We're down to what, 69, low 69s at this point on the Canadian exchange to U.S. dollars, and we're a net cattle feeder importer. That's that they get more. Sure, we reap the rewards of a low dollar when we're exporting live cattle. But
or beef, yeah, but on
beef.
Exactly. Yeah. And that goes back to that supply piece. The Canadian herd is so small that Canadian feedlots are really having to import U.S. feeder cattle to keep pens full. That's the supply side.
Anything else on your list?
One, I have to talk weather. You got to throw weather in. It's always on the list. If we get, like last year, the right amounts of moisture at the right times in the right places, those are all certainly positives. But we know there's a large part of the U.S. and Canada that are still, very much on the dry bias side. And really what plays out in 2025 plays a part in heifer retention decisions, what the ultimate feed grain prices look like. That's our main feeder price input for our feeder cattle. So weather always is on the list. And it really needs to still be there in terms of we came with some good moisture early last year, but it's been a dry second half of the year for most of us.
Yeah. And for those of you watching on YouTube, you can see there's whiteness behind me. It's cold in Western Canada and there is snow on the ground, but it's not the kind of snow that really makes that dramatic difference when it comes to moisture, when it comes to grass conditions. We got to wait for that a little bit in the spring.
Yeah.
Or for that to come true. Weather is always the biggest if, though. Like you said, if, and I think you did a good job with that in terms of it's in capital letters.
It's in capital letters. So I guess right now the big ifs are I got to put tariffs first from a Canadian cattle industry perspective. The question marks there for 25, and then I would put weather second. But the supply and demand side, I feel good about.
Awesome. Well, and a happy new year to you. Looking forward to our chats every 2 weeks here for the beef market update. Stay warm out there, okay?
Okay, you too, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you for downloading this episode of the Beef Market Update brought to you by Brett Young. Check out their silage and grazing corn stock blends or custom build your own mix for a happy, healthy herd. Talk to your retailer or visit brettyoung.ca today.